Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Awesome. I'm going to move the Zoom window side. So basically what Cloudscaff is it's sort of I wouldn't say a one-stop shop, because we do allow integration with Xero and stuff like that for the accounting side of things. But what we deal with is we deal with the estimating, the scaffold management, inventory management, and sort of all the bits and pieces, all the moving parts of the scaffold. So for instance, we've got estimates, so we've got like 3 different versions of estimates. One is a standard estimate, which is estimating for a single scaffold on a job site. So if you get a small small request for just a single scaffold, you could use a standard estimate. You've got the bulk estimates that deal with larger sites, and you need to do maybe 10 to however many scaffolds that you need to do. And then we've got inventory estimates. So those deal with hiring out of your material. So if you guys do hire out your material to other companies or just hire out the material to the client, there's the inventory estimate. So just to get started, maybe let's go over a standard estimate. I'll go over a completed one. It will just be easier. Okay, there isn't a pending one. Let me create one. Okay, so in creating of a standard estimate, you will be requested to enter in a site name. So this could be any sort of site name that you've got for the site. If it's if you don't know the name, just enter in any information and then change that at a later stage. Select a customer. So from the customer list, you will be able to see the list of customers that you've got, and you can as well add new customers. So this is just demo profile, so it's sort of just set to like customer 1. So once you've selected the customer, so it's sort of like allows you to track all your sort of relationship with the customer in terms of documents, handovers, inspections, and yeah, so it facilitates all of that. So once you've selected the customer, we've then got this customized message field that you could then customize any information that was provided to you. So you can put that in on the estimate, and that would be present on the PDFs and as well as the digital version. So you can set a discount percentage and start date and dates for that estimate if you do have that. Next would be in the scaffold tab of this estimate. You can select a scaffold type. So this list would be customizable. So you could preload all of this with a sort of your scaffold types in the settings, and then just select one of those scaffold types when you need to do an estimate. Enter in a description. So this could be sort of anything in terms of a location, elevation of the scaffold. If I can spell it correctly. And it could be used for anything, any sort of identification to identify that scaffold. And then you would simply enter in the dimensions of the scaffold and the number of lifts that it's got. And you can capture boarded lifts on this as well, if you want to identify how many boarded lifts on the scaffold. I'm not sure if I'm going through scaffold jargon with you. And if you need any explanation, feel free to just stop me and I'll explain it to you. So with quoting for scaffold, we've got a number of rate profiles that you can select from. And if there is a specific rate profile or very customized way of estimating, we can incorporate the rate profile for you to the list. So we will just select it. Of course, it's based on these 3 metrics: length of height. So if there's a very specific way that's calculated, that's possible. So I know in the UK that lifts is the most common one. So we can set that. So once you've set your default rate profiles, you can override that in the estimate directly. So if you need to override that, you can just do it in that line. But it does pull in with the default rate. Next is rent. For the scaffold, you can select between days or weeks. So you can select days, enter in 28 days standing. And again, for hire, we've got rate profiles based on certain calculations. So either days times rate or percentage of the total, or total percentage of the total times number of days. You can set that to 10% of the total. No, that would be percentage of total. Yeah, so it could be like 10%, 5%. You could set that to any sort of customized value. Extra hire sits here on top, so you can set that to a percentage. So if the scaffold does go into extra hire, you could track that extra hire cost on the estimate, so that the customer knows what that extra hire for the scaffold will be if it does exceed the hire date. So you could set that to a percentage once again, or you could just override the fixed cost for that. And we've got the ability to add attachments to the scaffold. So if you click that add button, what this allows you to do is sort of segment your scaffold up. So you can build it sort of, if you think of like Lego, you could isolate, like compartmentalize how you charge for the scaffold. So you could charge for one level at a different rate, one level at the next level at a different rate. Or you could do, for instance, if you're doing a independent, you could isolate each sort of side of the scaffold. So, or like add attachments to the scaffold. So it essentially is another scaffold. It just sits within the main one, and everything from the handover to the inspections are just housed within them. And we've got platforms. So if you do want to track platforms on an individual basis or boards, you can track that. So you can charge for each platform or level that you add. A lot of our customers just include everything in the scaffold cost. But if you do want to break that up, you can do it. So yeah, same goes for labor. If you want to charge for labor based on externally from the scaffold, you can isolate that cost. So you can create a labor profile. So in a labor profile, you can select your labor profile, and then you can create your categories of workers. So you can select them, and then each of those you can then set their labor rates for. And when you select the rate, so you'll say you need there's 8 hours a day, you need 3 days, you need 2 guys, and select the labor rate, either normal time, public holiday, or overtime, and that pulls it with a default rate, and that you can then just override if you need to, and you can add it whenever you want. Transport works on the same basis as a labor profile, so you select a transport profile, and then you can select a vehicle type if that's something that you guys track, and then you can go through sort of the same process for hiring of a vehicle that could be used for delivery costs or collection costs if you guys add that. Lastly, we've got additionals. So additionals is just sort of used for any line item that you want to add to the estimate. This could be for shade netting, any consumables that you need to add that is like either a fixed cost or as a rate. So it could just be used to add anything to the estimate. If you need to charge for drawings, or you want to charge for inspections, or anything goes there, to be honest. And then we've got this private budget. This just allows you to break down your costs internally. So this is just for your company. Break the cost of the estimate down into labor, materials, transport. It's a feature that was requested by one of our clients. So if you do need me to explain it, I'll happily do so. And lastly, we've got the summary. So the summary just contains all the information for the estimate, for instance, the customer and your company information, estimate code, start dates, end dates, as well as the information for that scaffold. So you can see that it's going to be for 28 days. These are the dimensions, and these are the costs, as well as this is going to be the extra higher cost of that scaffold. So once you save that estimate, if you save it, it will then be created, and it will be in a pending mode. It will be in a pending mode. So one of two things can happen. You can either download the PDF, if you can simply click the download button on there. What this will then do is download the estimate document, and you can then just send this to the client. And your terms and conditions are attached to that. So in the section, you can upload the terms and conditions for that. Or you could simply just send it through Cloudscaff, so you can send it directly to the client. What this will do is it will send them to a digital version of the estimate. So in the PDF version, there is a link to that. But if you send it to them directly, this will just send them to the digital version. And as soon as they open it, you'll get notified that they've opened it and read the estimate. Additionally, they can accept the terms and conditions and then either accept the estimate or reject the estimate or request an update or negotiate directly from the digital version. But as soon as they click approve, you will receive that email that says that they've approved the estimate, and then you can then proceed with the next step. Or they've rejected it, so you get that live real-time feedback to tell you what the customer thinks. They can also just download the PDF for themselves through that digital version. So once you receive the email that they've accepted this estimate or rejected it, you can then update the status of the scaffold of this estimate. So in the estimate, we've got the options either to select rejected, accepted, or we can simply update the estimate if they need something to be changed. Or you can create a revision. So creating a revision allows you to keep the state of the current estimate, but create a revision so that you can always refer back to it if something needs to be changed. So if we click accepted on the estimate, what you will then be prompted for is a purchase order. So you can enter in a purchase order number and enter in a work order if you've got one. And click next. Next, you will be prompted to select a site. So if you are attaching this estimate to an existing site, you would simply just select it from the list below, or you could create a new site. So we'll just attach it to an existing site, and it will just pull up all the information for the site. For instance, the site name, the start date, end date of the site, who's been allocated to that site. So there's the site information, the custom information. So you can simply just allocate that estimate to the site. And in the last step is it just shows you that we're going to be creating a scaffold with the details from this estimate, and just click accept estimate. So what this is going to do is generate a scaffold along with the invoice for the scaffold, as well as attach it to the site so that it can then be tracked on this job site. So we've attached it.
If you've got an end date in there for when the scaffold is due to be dismantled and it runs over, does that automatically calculate the extra hire?
Unfortunately not. So the thing is, because the dates are so sort of rigid, what we can do is notify you that the scaffold is going to be going off, but we don't want to automatically charge the clients because then that just sort of creates issues. So what we will do with those dates is notify you a couple of days before, a week before, that the scaffold is going to be ending soon. So you could then either charge for the extra hire on an invoice, or you could bill the client for that. So once the scaffold is created, it, as I mentioned, it gets attached to that site. So we've attached it to test site. And so this is the scaffold. So as you can see, it gets added to the list. And if we click on that scaffold, we've got the information for that scaffold. So it gives us the overview as to what that scaffold should be. And then we've got inspections, we've got handovers, modifications. As I mentioned, that we do generate an invoice for that scaffold at that point. So the invoice is customizable. So you can edit that invoice if something needs to be changed at a later stage. And then you can send that invoice off. And then we've got payments and credit notes. So once the scaffold is sort of accepted, you can then either run an inspection or a handover, either or before. This just allows you to capture in the dimensions of the scaffold whenever you are doing inspection. We do know that the scaffolds don't all go up at one go. So we can track that dimensions or the height of the scaffold and simply mark that as safe for use, as well as any attachments that are added to the scaffold. You can just simply add them to the inspection and track that as well. Same goes for platforms. You can add platforms to the inspection if you need to inspect it, or if you would like to inspect them. And then we've got the inspection checklist. So this is something that is fully customizable. You can build your own sort of categories and questions for this checklist. And anything that needs to go in there, you could simply add. It is a yes/no sort of checkbox. So you would simply put in questions and then issue a yes or no question answer. And then we've lastly got is the scaffold safe for use. So this is just explicitly stating whether that scaffold is safe for use or not. And then you can add any notes there that sort of the supervisor needs to track. So once you create an inspection, because we marked that it's safe for use, it does pass the inspection. But if you click on that, you can see all the questions that have been answered in the checklist. And each one of our documents have a digital and a PDF version, so you can always access the digital one via the PDF. And it does contain all the information as well as the status and conditions for that inspection. Next, and you can run as many inspections as you want. So we don't restrict you to only one inspection. Next would be handover. So handover sort of works on the same basis as inspection, where you've got to enter the dimensions of the scaffold and mark that it's safe for use on that line. So you can again attach any additional attachments or platforms, and then you can set your maximum load for the scaffold, mark that it's safe for use, and the handover type. So the handover type just allows us to, in the scaffold register, determine the status of a scaffold, whether it's currently undergoing an erection or a dismantle. So we would add any notes, so we could say handed over, create the handover. And once a handover is created, we do require a signature. So if we go in there, you can then just again send this to the customer. They can sign directly from the digital version. Alternatively, if you guys on site, they can simply go to the guy with the device. For instance, if it's on his mobile phone or the app, they can simply sign this, enter their name, and then they simply sign the document right on the app.
Sorry, did you just say there's an app? Is there a Cloudscaff app?
Yes. So it's not in the App Store at the moment. So we are just still pending the App Store approvals. But what you can do is the website can be downloaded onto your device and be fully functional as an app. So it does sort of convert itself to an app. There is instructions on our main website as to how to do that. But yeah, it's fully functional as an app and installable. But we will have the actual App Store version out very soon. So everything I'm doing on this computer can be done from a mobile device as well. So you can simply sign for that directly on the device. And once the signature gets saved, it gets attached to the PDF as well as the online version. It gets stored there. So if I download that handover, this could then be either emailed or printed out and applied to the client. So we view that, and all documents. So you can see it's just as your logo here. You can customize this to your company brand, and they will always have access to the digital version of the handover. So once it's signed, the signature gets attached as well as any terms and conditions, and that's pretty much the handover. And if we check the scaffold register now, once a handover is done, we can log in the scaffold register the current dimensions of that scaffold, as well as how many platforms were on it, and if the status, meaning it was just erected, and that's the notes for it, and who issued that handover. So we can log that in the scaffold register, and this just every time it updates, it will update the register in real time. So you kind of have an insight into that site. So once the scaffold is handed over, you can then, if something needs to be modified, you can issue a modification. Modifications work on a similar basis of a handover, except if you change something, we can track if something is changed. So if we change the length, for instance, we can see that you've increased the length by that amount. And we tell you that, we sort of calculate the change. And as we can see that in modification, we show you what the scaffold was before the modification and what the scaffold is going to be after the modification, then what the cost for that is going to be. So that there is no sort of miscommunication with the client. They can see exactly what was requested. Yeah. So it's pretty much the exact same thing as the estimate, except you can estimate for that modification, and everything is documented. Additionally, it will create a new invoice for you that you can then invoice the client with, and that's pretty much how modifications work. As I mentioned, invoices are pretty much if the estimate except in an invoice. So you could just update that if anything is due on the invoice that needs to be added or modified, you can add that to the invoice directly.
You said it can be linked to Xero, right?
Yes. So we are currently in that integration phase. I think by early next week, we should have been linked with Xero, and we can sync all these invoices up with Xero. And yeah, that should be good to go. So you can track payments on this as well. So if a customer is paid an invoice, before you send an invoice off, you can set an amount due. So for instance, if you need to get a 20% deposit, for instance, you can say that you need a 20% due on this invoice. Simply update that. And when you download that invoice, it will be for the amount, which is 20%. And then once you capture a payment on that, which you don't need to do, because if you're going to be using Xero for that, all of that can be managed on the Xero side. But if you do, you can capture a payment in there. So you can set a payment date, and that will be for the 20% that was due. So once you capture that payment, we see that there is a partial payment on that invoice. And then if we go into payments, we can see that a payment was made. And if we download that invoice, that will be the invoice for the 20%. And the current invoice is now got the 80% due. So you could then invoice as many times as you want with as many percentages as you want. So you could run payment methods on any invoice if you need to. Credit notes pretty much just a form that documents. You can list anything that you need to credit the item for in a description basis, and that's pretty much credit note. It is much cheaper. So that's pretty much the scaffold side of, or scaffold management side of the system. We are still busy with a lot of updates in terms of scheduling and planning. That is our next big update, is to facilitate the planning and scheduling of what happens to these scaffolds. So as I mentioned, we've got the scaffold register that you can track everything that goes onto that. We've got the inventory list, so each site has its own inventory tracking that you can track material that has been sent to that site, requests for material, returns of material. So any material that enters and leaves the site is documented under requests and returns, as well as billable shipments. And these are just for, billable shipments are mainly for sites that you are hiring your inventory out to, not necessarily building scaffolds to, on. As well as shipment invoices. And lastly, if you would like to not issue an invoice for an individual scaffold, for instance, your larger sites may work on payment applications. We do have a payment application. So if you click on the payment application, what this will do is pull up all the scaffolds on the site, and you can track the progress for this site for all the scaffolds. So you can set your percentage that a scaffold was erected, and a percentage of applied income for the scaffold, as well as the start dates, end dates, track your hire end dates, track your inspection dates, anything that's gone over extra hire, you can directly add in this document, so you can trigger extra hire. I know in the UK, a lot of companies do use payment applications, so that might be quite useful. sorry, so it just allows you to do sort of a bulk invoice, and if there's anything that you need to add, you can simply add it in there. You can track variation orders in there. So if you need to do a variation order, instead of doing an estimate, you can simply come into the payment application and document. For instance, if you need to extend the scaffold, you can just track that in there. So add the amount and the date for that. And what this will do is, based on the date that you set, the number of weeks, it will then automatically determine the end date. So if I set it to 4 weeks, it automatically calculates the end date for that scaffold. And you can track a handover code on there, as well as the applied percentage. So if you want to set that to 100% or 50%.
You asked if you could record this. Is there any way that you could send the recording to me so my boss could see that?
100%. Okay. I'll just transfer that to you at the end of this. So you can say you apply for 100% of the erection total, and that will just add that to the cost. And then once you click Save Payment Application, of course, after you set the due date, if you click Save Payment Application, what this will do is, I think I haven't completed this line, but essentially it will just save the payment application, and then you can just download that and then either send that off to the client. And again, this will be synced with Xero. What this will do, how this will sync with Xero, is we will generate an invoice after this payment application has been saved. We will generate an invoice for the total amount on this payment application. That will then be synced with Xero with the payment application reference, and that will then be synced on Cloudscaff as well as Xero. So if you need to look at the invoice, you will get the payment application number that you can just search for in Cloudscaff and reference that payment application. So yeah, that's pretty much payment applications. Operation application, it's exactly the same thing. All it does is just allow you to track it from an internal perspective, is track your income on a weekly basis. Instead of just doing it at the end of the month, you could do an operational application every day, every week. It doesn't affect your financials, it just allows you to track it, to track your income and your spend. Lastly would be the inventory system. The inventory system just allows you to load all your inventory components into this in terms of your quantities. You can track cross-hire. You can track your available stock and your yard stock in real time, as well as anything that's in maintenance or damaged or lost. As well as if you click on any one of the components that are in use, you can view its location. So if you click on the here, it's a view location, you can see exactly where all our components are sitting, on which sites, and the quantities that they are currently should be there in theory. So you can track each sort of component. And as I mentioned, each site has their own stock list, so you can view the site and view all the inventory that should be on that site. And cross-hire, as I said, you can manage in terms of just simply add it as its own component. And then if you need to track anything that is hired out from another company, you would simply just click the location, and then you can track exactly where those components are sitting. Shipments sort of just allow you to ship material to the site, so you can simply click add a shipment, select the site that you're going to be using, and then search for your components. So for instance, if you're searching for boards, you can simply search for boards and then ship 200 of them. And just go through the list of the components, and then once you do a shipment, the shipment will then be allocated to the site. So if we view a shipment that was sent, and you can see that this was sent to the test site. Billable shipments sort of are the same thing as a shipment, except what it does is it tracks income in terms of how much you're going to be charging for the components. If you do hire them out, and the days that you're going to, the period that you're going to be hiring out the components for. So it's sort of just the shipment that you can charge for. That does come through the inventory estimate, if you guys are interested in that. Requests are sort of from the site. So anytime a supervisor requests material, you will receive a request. So your stock manager will then just go into the system, look at the request. Once they've accepted that request, the system automatically generates a shipment for them. And all they have to do is go into the shipment and click send. And that will be the shipment sent. So once the shipment is sent, it does happen. So if we look at this component, so I will be sending forward. You just enter a start date for the shipment. And then first and side to shipments. So if I click send shipment, update shipment, update the shipment, and save. So what this is going to do is, as I click send shipment, if I click on this boards, you can now see that it's allocated 200 in use. And if I click on that and view its location, you can see we've got 200 at Westminster. And if I go into the site of Westminster and I look at inventory, I can see that I've now got those 200 boards in the site stock. So it is in real time. Requests, as I mentioned, is they would receive the request. Returns pretty much is the same thing. Is if they're done with the material on site, they issue a return, say that we need this material collected, a valid document, all of that. And then in the return, we can track if anything is damaged. If you guys are doing a count of your inventory, we can track anything that's damaged, anything that's lost. And based on if you've calculated or entered in the higher cost and replacement cost, we can then generate an invoice if anything is lost or missing directly to the client, so that you could charge for that. And lastly would be transfers. Transfers just allow you to transfer stock between sites without it having to come to the yard. You would simply select the site, and if I select Westminster, it will pull up the site stock for that site, so you can simply transfer the material to another site without it having to come to the yard and do a stock take and do a shipment. You can just issue a transfer directly to that site. And that's pretty much Cloudscaff. Lastly would be the statement. So for any customer, you can generate a statement. So you simply select the date and then pretty much a standard statement.
Yeah.
Then you've got your settings, we can add users, rate profiles, and all the good stuff. and yeah.
What about the cost of it? How much is it?
So we currently have changed our pricing. So we do charge we used to charge per sort of document, but we charge, I think it's £15 on a yearly basis.
For how much?
£15 per user on a monthly subscription, or £10 per user on a annual subscription. So yeah, so $15 on the sites, but yeah, $15 on a monthly and $10 on the annual. And
right.
If there is anything that you need to customize in terms of if you need a very specific document to be added, or if you need anything customized in any way, we do have an enterprise option. The enterprise option does run from £1,490. What that gets you is your own system that you can fully customize, and then that's the base fee for the system. And if there's anything that you need to add on top of that, it would be either like a £50 increase to the monthly subscription for any features that need to get added. But I'm pretty sure that guys don't need an enterprise option just yet. But yeah, if there is an enterprise option, if needed.